23rd meeting of the Portland City Council. Will you please call the roll, Sue?
Saltzman.
Here.
Novick.
Here.
Fritz.
Here.
Fish. Here. Hales.
Here. Before we begin the regular calendar, I want to welcome a group of students in the room from the Oregon Fellows Summer Program at the PSU Hatfield School of Government. Some of you know these students already because they're working in our offices or otherwise in city administration. It's a program that OMF is working with, and they're sponsoring a job shadow day today. They are here to see how this part of the public process works. They're from all over the country. They come to Oregon to participate in this PSU program. During this time, they're either in a 10-week or 8-month job placement with a public agency somewhere in the metropolitan area. They're focusing their studies in areas of financial management, sustainability, project and grant management, social and environmental policy analysis, economics, budgeting, quantitative research methods, and urban planning. In their spare time, they might think about another subject or two, but that's a lot. And they're also matching up individually with city professionals from the financial analysis and management analysis side who volunteered to serve as mentors to the students. Some of them are here. Each student has the opportunity to interface with at least a couple of our professionals during the day. So we want to welcome the Oregon Fellows. We hope you enjoy this council session and the rest of this process. Thanks to OMF. I see Betsy's here. Would you like to talk a little bit about this program for a moment? Okay.
It's a good partnership with Portland State.
So let's.
Good partnership with Portland State University, and those who are here.
Could you stand and we'll recognize you? Good morning. Welcome. Let's hear it. The future public administrators, get to know them. You'll recognize them when they're back here in another capacity. We hope. Thank you all, and good luck. Okay, we'll begin the regular calendar. We have 5 communications items first, and then we'll move into the rest of the calendar. For those of you who are here to speak, we have some rules, which is we give people typically 3 minutes to speak, including in our public communications, unless there's a special presentation that's been invited for the council session. If you want to demonstrate your support for somebody, please do so non-verbally. If you agree with them, give them a wave or something, but we want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to speak and be heard. If you have materials to distribute to the council, please give them to our clerk, Sue. And if you are a lobbyist representing an organization, please disclose that and who you're representing when you come up to speak. And with that, we'll take the communications items first, Troy. Sue, thank you.
Item 766, request of Crystal Olinsky to address council regarding incumbency. What does it really mean?
Is she here? Is Crystal here? Okay, then let's move on to the next one.
Request of Lightning to address council regarding Clean Water Act dredging.
Good morning, Lightning. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Think Lab. One of the issues that I have on dredging, as you know, we're moving forward on the Willamette Park boat launch, which is a city-owned property to have it dredged. And they've tested some of the silt or the dredging material, and it's contaminated. Now, they've tried to take that contaminated material to an off-site location on the land, and they've been denied. So, in my opinion, we've got a little bit of a problem there, because I really wonder if there's been enough research to see if other locations might take that contaminated dredging material, but they've come up with a solution, and their solution is, let's dredge and take it from the Willamette, transport it up to the Columbia, and dump it into the river. Now, you see, I have a big problem with that, is that if we don't start looking at that river and trying to protect the river and quit using it for a dumping site for contaminations, you don't want to swim in those rivers. And I'm telling you now, I have a real problem with this on not looking at other alternatives for this contaminated dredging material. The solution is not to take it up to the Columbia River and dump it back into the river. And as you know, you all might be wondering, well, why not just dump it in the Willamette, take it a little ways down and do that? Well, I think you've all heard the term Superfund. They're not going to do it on the Willamette because we have a Superfund cleanup in the process or getting ready to move forward, and they don't want to do it on the Willamette anymore, so let's take it up to the Columbia and dump it into the river there. I'm not happy with Oregon Marine Board. I'm not happy with the Corps of Engineers, Army Corps of Engineers. I think you need to start rethinking on what you're going to do with contaminated dredging material, and I have a real problem with what you're doing here. And you may approve it, and they may stand back and say, we've been approved, but I don't approve it. I disagree with what you're doing, and remember the term Superfund cleanup, and you are in the position to make sure that this river does not become more contaminated in the future, and you're not doing your job. So I'm appalled at what you're doing on this. Thank you.
Lightning, I appreciate you making the points. You're illustrating why the Office of Healthy Working Rivers was a good concept, and the folks there were looking at exactly the questions that you're asking.
Yes.
In the absence of that office, if you could please contact Patty Howard in my office, and she'll give you the background of why that was approved.
Okay, and like I say, I've dealt with the Army Corps of Engineers myself. I've dealt with the Oregon Marine Board. They may decide that it's correct to do that, and in the past it's been correct, but the public knows you don't take contaminated dredging material, transfer it from the Willamette, and dump it into the Columbia that hasn't been named a Superfund site as of this time, and that needs to stop. You don't put contamination back into the river. I'm appalled at the Oregon Marine Board. I'm appalled at the Army Corps of Engineers, and I think you need to start rethinking this and understand contamination does not belong in the river. If you remove it, keep it out of the river. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, next item, please.
768, request of Angela Hammett to address council regarding citizens' right to privacy and the ESP program administered by the Police Bureau.
Ms. Hammond, you here? Angela? Okay, well, let's move on then, please.
769, request of Benjamin Barber to address council regarding the National Day of Civic Hacking.
Mr. Barber, come on up. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you all for your time. So a month or two ago, there was this event called the National Day of Civic Hacking, and it provides people like myself the ability to serve our country without going to war overseas. And it was a great opportunity to meet like-minded individuals. We were working on the Zadell property site, and we're coming up with ideas for how that could be best utilized, and came up with the concept of an innovation corridor and some short-term uses, and those uses are already being used, such as the, what was it called? There was a big concert down there for, anyways, I digress. There is, as you may well know, the OSCON Open Source Convention that's going on currently at the Expo Center. Similarly, pretty much the majority of all the computers that are running today are basically built by these communist software developers. And I know that some of you have talked about the sharing economy, and maybe some of that ought to be the city sharing the burden of its work with its citizens. There is, for instance, the bike share. I'm sure you guys know. For instance, Intel sponsors a group called the Open Bike Initiative, which seeks to make an open source bike lock, which could be remotely activated. Similarly, I see an item on your agenda for parking enforcement. And while I'm sure that the company is very competent and will deliver a good product, I see no reason why a competent mobile developer could not build, for instance, an application downloadable by anyone on any smartphone to take pictures and issue a ticket, since we have a civil or individual citation process. And perhaps it would require less meter maids to patrol if people were given the tools to do it themselves. So what I'd like to propose is that someone in the Office of Neighborhood Involvement find some method of providing an infrastructure or method where people who want to donate their time to worthy causes and endeavors that the city wants to do to be able to do so.
Thanks. Good suggestion. I think the idea of hackathons and other ways for people in the tech community to give us innovative ideas, we haven't quite figured it out, but I think it's something that on the public sector side we're really interested in.
Yeah, by all means. And if you ever need me, I'll be happy to provide some help.
Good, thank you very much. Thanks. Okay, item 770.
770, request of Donald Scott Upham to address council regarding Police Bureau actions concerning Megan McCoy.
Good morning, Mr. Upham, welcome.
Morning. My name's Scott Upham. On February 25th,
I just looked at your statement. You're a lawyer representing someone that has a pending claim, so could you identify,
it's not there's no pending claim.
well, you have a client, so if you just identify your status before you tell us your status.
Oh, sure. I represent a lady who reported to the Washington County Sheriff's Office that she had been raped by a man, both in Multnomah and Washington counties. Thereafter, Washington County submitted the report to the Portland Police Bureau in January of 2012. Both my client and her rape victim advocate contacted the Portland Police Bureau on several occasions to find out what they were doing about this complaint. But they were stonewalled and never received a response. So finally, each gave up. I wrote this letter 2 years later to the Portland Police Bureau on this lady's behalf to find out why she was never contacted and why this case was never investigated. A couple hours after I wrote the email, I got a response back from the chief's office saying that someone should be contacting me soon. We then came down to Portland 3 days later and spent 2 hours with a detective who took a partial statement from her, didn't even come close to completing all the information in her possession. She was asked and she agreed to allow the police to come to her house to download all the information on her phone that she'd accumulated for over 4 years, text messages, emails, so on and so forth. I asked to receive a copy of that report and they said I couldn't get one. I then asked the detectives why on earth was she not contacted for over 2 years, and neither had an explanation for that. The following day, or excuse me, 5 days later after the interview, I got a letter from George Burke, commander of the detective division, saying, "Thank you for taking the time to follow up with us. This case has been assigned to Detective Tracy Chamberlain for follow-up. He will be in touch with you in the near future." Obviously, he didn't know that we'd already been interviewed. He says, "I believe the intended path for this will be to present it to the DA's office for possible prosecution when the investigation is complete. We will be working closely with your client as we move forward." I then wrote back to the chief's office and said, "I just got the email from Commander Burke, but he did not answer my question as to why no action has been taken on this case for over 2 years. And to this day, I still haven't received an answer as to what happened. The reports that were received by the Portland Police Bureau more than 2 years ago. And of course, the Public Records Act requires the Police Bureau to maintain and preserve those documents.
You've used your time, and we don't want to go into the whole case now, but I appreciate you highlighting this and bringing it to our attention. I understand the district attorney is about to schedule this case for a grand jury.
Well, that's news to us.
Well, that's what I've just been told this morning, so it's news to me too. And then Commander Burke is here in the room, and I'd actually suggest that you and he confer about preparing for the grand jury, because it sounds like, for whatever reason, at long last, the case is going to a grand jury. So you're obviously doing your job as an advocate for your client. We appreciate that, and it's a serious crime whenever it occurs or is alleged, so it needs to get to a grand jury, and I'm glad to see that that's happening.
Well, I really wanted to impart that, boys who grow into men are trained and told never to hit a woman, ever. But sexually assaulting women seems to be kind of okay in this society.
Well, it's not tolerated here.
And the course of this so-called investigation, which is now more than 2.5 years old, kind of indicates that attitude prevails in the DA's offices in this metropolitan area and in the police departments. Not one witness was interviewed in this case until July, and that was only after the Oregonian wrote an article.
Well,
And
again,
now today, I hear, because I've come to you folks,
Right.
someone's going to do something about it. This shouldn't be required. I mean, I don't like to come down here and be a jerk and tell you people what a terrible job has been done in this particular case, but I've made multiple attempts to communicate with you, Mayor Hales, and the police chief, and no one has ever responded to me.
Well, we'll find out why that happened, because that shouldn't happen. And again, Commander Burke is here. I want to ask you to meet with him, and then I'll follow up with him and get a report to my office about what's happened with this case and why. So I appreciate you highlighting it, and I don't think you're being a jerk by bringing your client's legitimate interests to the public. So we appreciate you doing that and appreciate you spending time with him. And obviously, I will also spend some time with the district attorney on the subject of sexual assault cases, because we take them very seriously, and Commander Burke and his detectives to take them seriously when they're investigating one, as well as, our Drugs and Vice Division is pretty serious about human trafficking and all the consequences of it. So something that is a priority for the Portland Police Bureau, and I'm sorry if in this case, the process has been slow or uncertain, because that's not what our intent in this council.
Well, the proof's in the pudding.
It is.
And this is the status as it right now, so.
Thank you very much. Okay, anyone arrived that was called earlier? Zelensky or Ms. Hammett? No? Okay, so now let's move to consent agenda, please. I don't believe we have any requests to remove items from the consent calendar, is that right?
I did not either.
Okay, then let's take a roll call on the consent calendar as published.
Salzman?
Aye.
Novick?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hales?
Aye. Okay, regular agenda, item 778.
Authorize the allocation of $8,600 to extend Portland Parks and Recreation's free summer lunch program between August 25th and August 29th at 11 sites.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor Hales. And first, I want to thank Commissioners Fish and Saltzman for co-sponsoring this ordinance and helping my staff put it together in my absence. Portland Parks and Recreation provides over 100,000 free lunches to school-aged children in Portland every summer. However, at the end of every summer, there is a one-week gap where the school kitchens that provide these lunches are closed. For $8,600, we can provide lunches at 11 sites for the week of August 25th through the 29th. This ordinance also directs the City Budget Office to add this to Parks' current appropriation level for future years to ensure that we continue to feed children during this gap week.
Other co-sponsors would like to speak about this?
I'll just make a quick comment, Mayor. First, I want to thank Commissioner Fritz for bringing this forward. Happy to co-sponsor it. In 2009, this issue first came up when we learned that there was a gap between the program that Parks was providing and the beginning of the school year. And that was the last time I recall the council addressing this, and Mayor Adams felt very strongly about this, and the council then appropriated some gap money. Fast forward, this is one of the most successful programs of Summer Free for All. As Commissioner Fritz said, over 100,000 healthy meals to kids. And the additional benefit is these meals are served in playground programs where parents can drop their kids off, know that they are in a safe place, exposed to healthy activities during the summer. And so it's one of the great programs in Summer Free for All. And while the federal government, through an entitlement program, pays for the food, the cost that the city's picking up has to do with the delivery and the distribution of the food. I think this is a vitally important program. I'm very pleased the council put hunger as a top priority for this council in terms of our budgeting. The kids that are served, and many of them are East Portland kids, need these healthy meals. And I think this is an excellent step in expanding the program so there is no gap. Too many kids go to bed hungry at night, and at least through this program, the kids that are served will not. So I thank Commissioner Fritz for bringing this forward, and I'm very proud to co-sponsor it.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Commissioner Fritz and Parks Director Mike Abate and his staff for coming up with this proposal to close the summer hunger gap in our parks programs. And although it's a small amount of money, it will really make a huge difference for hundreds of children that are faced with the dilemma of getting a meal in that week between when summer free-for-all ends and Portland schools begin. So once again, they can have lunch meals. So very happy that there are a lot of transportation logistical issues around this, and I appreciate the Parks Bureau committing to do this. I also want to thank the Parks Foundation. I think we all got an email yesterday from Nick Hardig mentioning that the Parks Foundation is also contributing money to eliminate this summer meal gap. And I guess my only question, Commissioner Fritz, I just want to assure that the ongoing appropriation we're also creating today will go specifically for the summer meal gap.
Correct.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Now, has anyone signed up to speak on this item?
We had two testifiers, Charles Johnson and Joe Walsh.
Come on up. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Charles Johnson, and I do want to thank Commissioner Fritz and all you for your attention to this important matter, but I want to set the context for this in that there's something wrong with the governmental system, the federal, state, and local governmental system, when the City Council has to have an agenda item about feeding hungry children. The fact that we send most of Oregon's total tax revenue to Washington and then it's dribbled back, and the bureaucrats along the way can't make the system work so that children are already eating without a special item on the City Council tells us that our government and the citizens who are supposed to be monitoring this government aren't quite getting their job right. So I want to encourage you in your legislative liaisons with Blumenauer, not so much Bonamici and stuff because of where we live, but especially Wyden and Merkley, that federal programs designed to assure adequate nutrition for children should just get the job done. There shouldn't need to be time-consuming bureaucratic paperwork, intergovernmental agreements, and stuff like that. It is good that in Portland we have the Children's Levy and a Parks Foundation that can be there to fill the gap. But as I want to encourage my fellow citizens and you to work to see that the federal programs get the job done so that children don't have to rely on an item being put on City Council so that they can have healthy, nutritious food in a gap week. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, if I just may defend our congressional representatives, I think that our representatives in this past year were engaged in battling people on the other side of the aisle who were perfectly willing to cut food stamps while eagerly reaffirming subsidies for agribusiness. So there is something of a partisan divide in the issue of food for hungry people versus subsidies and for that matter, massive military spending in Congress.
Definitely the military spending is a problem. And also, all of us need to work on our communication with people who might be a little bit further south or a little bit further east, to make sure that, children over guns and bombs remains a top priority of this country, and that we can bring all of Oregon along to, regardless of our political party identification, realize that it's much more beneficial to our society to focus on health and education for children than creating a few more bomber and Boeing and drone jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Walsh.
My name is Joe Walsh. I represent Individuals for Justice. Congratulations. This is really a good thing. I was a volunteer at Atkinson for a long time, and we did a snack program for the children waiting for buses. So I'm very sensitive to these types of programs. The only criticism that I would offer is there's not enough money in this budget. I would like to see more money. So I would like to see the five of you reconsider this, and either now or next year when you do it, because I don't see anything coming out of Congress either, you'll probably have to do this again next year. I do have a question for the commissioner, though. What happens when you have these children getting these lunches and obviously they're hungry, so they come from poor families? What happens to the families? Are they included in the lunch? So if a mother or a father was also hungry, is there a provision that you would allow them to enjoy the lunch also?
I'm not exactly sure of the answer to your question. I know that most of the children come without their parents because their parents are at work.
I think I know,
Okay,
I think I know a partial answer to that question, which is the federal funding is for the kids' lunches.
So you exclude everybody else?
Exclude is a hard word.
I use very hard words.
I'm not sure that that's always the practice, but it would
Well,
probably be
could
better
you,
to talk about
one
it
of you
privately.
have a staff member look into that? And maybe next year, when you have more money, if you get some stuff done on the ballots, you could turn around and say, you know what? If a parent, one parent, I'm thinking, is in the park or wherever you're going to do the lunches, if they are hungry, do you have a provision not to turn them away? That would be very difficult for me as, say, a volunteer to do. So I don't want to put you in that position, and I'm suggesting that you have a staff member do some research and see if it's feasible or possible.
I'll do that, and I'll get back to you the next time I see you outside.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And again, congratulations.
Anyone else like to speak? Okay, it's an emergency ordinance. Let's take a roll call, please.
Salzman,
Aye.
Novick,
Aye.
Fritz,
Thanks to Commissioner Saltzman, who raised this when we were doing the initial allocations for the full summer program, and then Director Mike Abate, who got right on it and figured out as much as we could to do this. Also, Commissioner Fish, who did pioneer this, and throughout the course of the recession, we've made hard choices on the council and found funding for this program. Nick Hardig of the Portland Parks Foundation was mentioned. The day that we did the previous allocation, I was opening the summer program at Pier Park along with some of our corporate sponsors. And Nick Hardig, of course, was there, as he's at almost every event I go to for parks. And so he had mentioned that there was an anonymous donor who was willing to give some money. And the anonymous donor wanted to do an enrichment program so that kids wouldn't get bored. And as Nick and I discussed this funding problem, we thought, well, if kids are hungry, it's hard for them to do anything. So I believe he went back to that donor and helped engage that community. There are still some gaps, though. The ordinance mentions that Portland Public Schools, it completely covers the gap, but Centennial and David Douglas don't start until September 4th, so this is the first week after Labor Day for those districts. I'm not sure what the situation is in Park Rose. But and also these 11 sites are only a fraction of the sites that we cover, but we couldn't figure out how to provide the services with the kitchens being closed for beginning of school activities. So I do encourage our Backpack Buddies program. This is not just a problem during the summer. During the school year, there are many faith communities that partner with Portland Public Schools and other public schools in the area, many in association with the Palau organization, that realized that kids were going hungry between Friday afternoon and Monday morning. And in some schools, they have to take turns with which kids get to take home food for the weekend. So I agree with Mr. Johnson's point that this is a disgrace in the country with the affluence that we have to draw lots for which kids are hungry over the weekend. And I'm very proud that we have our local government, which is in some ways the last resort or the safeguard to make sure that we can cover some of these programs, and we rely on our community volunteers as well. So if there are those watching at home who are in PTAs or in faith communities that should be asking their school administrators, who I believe are still on duty until they get their summer vacation, there's still more that needs to be done. But I'm very proud that this council is doing what we can. Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Hales.
It's a good piece of work. I think we were all nodding during Mr. Johnson's testimony, because once again, the city's in a position of cobbling together a solution where other governments have responsibility, and not a new phenomenon. But I think it's a little more hopeful than that, in that once again, I think we found a common sense solution, a patch, if you will. And there's some other good things that are going on, but we have a huge hunger problem in Oregon and in this city. One of the good things that's going on, that's correlative to this, is that the Sun schools are having more and more food pantry operations staffed by volunteers. I saw the one out at Earl Boyle's, which was staffed by women from that neighborhood distributing food to their neighbors every Friday. out of the Sun School, and they found a storage room in the elementary school where the food pantry can be operated. So there are a lot of these kind of local innovations involving usually the nonprofit sector, the food bank, a nonprofit group, volunteers, and the city, and the school district. But to try to make these things more certain and more regular and build them into budgets and programs for the long run, I think is where we all want to go. But for now, this is a creative and humane patch on a system that's not perfect by any stretch, and I'm really proud that we're doing this. Aye. Okay, item 779.
779, improve land use regulations related to accessory short-term rentals through the Regulatory Improvement Code Amendment Package 6.
Okay, so we have Sandra Wood here to walk us through this. We have a substitute ordinance, which is Exhibit A, and this is a result of our hearing on July 2nd. We voted on several amendments to what the Planning and Sustainability Commission had forwarded to us. This substitute ordinance encompasses those amendments that the council made during our previous hearing. It also includes one additional change, and that's because it came to my attention that the existing code requires guest bedrooms to be within a dwelling unit, which is either the house or the accessory dwelling unit. That means that a guest bedroom in a detached accessory structure, which is the case in some places, a single structure in the backyard would not be allowed if it hadn't been formally approved as an accessory dwelling unit. I think I've got that right. It hasn't gone through the ADU process, but it's nevertheless there and used as a bedroom, can't be used. That's obviously not going to be a huge number of these, but I asked the staff to incorporate a code change to deal with this inconsistency. So you'll see that on pages 21 and 27 showing that additional code change for both types of accessory short-term rentals. So before we discuss the overall package, we need to put the substitute ordinance on the table and then hear from staff. So is there a motion to substitute the substitute?
Move the substitute.
Second?
Okay, and roll call to put the substitute on the table?
Salzman.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Hales.
Aye, okay. So Sandra, I'll ask you to take it from there and review anything else that needs to be covered that I may have left out or answer any questions from the council, so.
So I think, Mayor Hales, we've covered everything. We do need to take testimony on this.
Yes, we will.
This last piece of amendment, but other than that, I think everything's on the table.
Okay, any questions for the Bureau? Okay,
I guess I have one question. Just want to make sure that, I know that we're allowing homeowners to rent up to 1 or 2 bedrooms in their house.
Correct. Through a type A, and then 3 to 5 bedrooms to a type B accessory short-term rental through the conditional use process.
Okay. Well, that's like a B and B.
Yes,
Bed and breakfast,
yes.
right? Okay. So can somebody rent their entire house for a period of time as well under our new ordinance?
So the new ordinance requires that the primary resident live at the house for at least 9 months, and that's the amendment that you passed last time. So if they're there for 9 months and they're going to be gone for 3 months, they could pull a type A permit and rent out 1 or 2 bedrooms. The idea is that they're not renting out the full house. If they have a 5-bedroom house, they're not renting out all 5 bedrooms.
So they can rent out 1 or 2 of their bedrooms and not actually be there for 3 months maximum?
That's a possibility, yeah.
Okay.
That would be the maximum.
Okay, thanks.
other questions or concerns for staff? Great, thank you, Sandra. Do we have folks signed up to testify on the amendment?
3 testifiers, Lightning, Joe Walsh, and Benjamin Barber.
Okay, come on up.
Go on up.
Morning.
Good morning. My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Think Lab. One of the issues, again, I have on the short-term rentals is that I actually think that the homeowner should have a right to participate in the short-term rentals. I don't think they should be denied that. I know we're going to be doing a zoning code change, on this to be able to do that. Now, one of the issues I have, and I'll be candid, is that some of these new companies like Airbnb, Uber, and Lyft, you're talking shared economy, and that sounds great, but I have a real problem with you entering the Portland, Multnomah County market and thinking you can operate illegal. You've been doing that for the last few years, and then you think you can all of a sudden push this through and get it approved. I have a real problem with that because that gives you a competitive advantage over the locals who operate property management companies, very knowledgeable at what they do, know how to do this, but they stand back because they say, hey, if we do that, that could jeopardize my business, and in the community, I've tried to follow the rules and the laws up to this point. Now, yes, it would be great if it's approved and I can step in and begin, but you've already taken a market share of possibly 1,500 plus or minus listings. That gives you a great competitive advantage. Now, I'm not saying not to approve this because I want it approved. I'm saying we need to look at Airbnb and say, look, you've operated for many years in the past. We're going to fine you for every listing that you basically were able to get illegally. And or we're going to exclude you for up to 1 year when we approve this and let the competitors have a fair playing field out there who have followed the rules, follow the laws. You don't come into this city thinking you can get things approved by breaking the law. It doesn't happen. We're watching this very closely. There's locals here who want to participate in the short-term rentals, and they have every right to do it. And when you're talking shared economies, what I want to do, I'm from Portland. I've been living in Portland my whole life. I want to see the local property management companies have net worth companies of over $1 billion, like yours is $10 billion right now, by operating illegally in this city. I want this to be looked at close. I want fines assessed against you, and I want you to understand, you don't push things through and get them approved by operating illegal, and the locals here are sitting back following the rules, and you don't take over the market and create a monopoly for your company. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think, Lightning, that we have, the city attorney could advise us on this, but I don't think we have the ability to fine people for behavior that wasn't prohibited before. Now, I think the people that were in violation of the zoning code by operating short-term rentals without it being legal under our zoning code is not the network company like Airbnb or any of these others, but the property owner. So the people that we have the authority to go after, I believe the people we have the authority to go after are the homeowners.
That is correct.
And that would be at least theoretically possible for the city of Portland to go after those 1,500 or so, or however many there are in all these different organizations, to go after people for not having complied with the law before.
Okay, if I can respond to that, please. I look at Airbnb as an enabler, number one. I'm not going to say that they're operating it illegally, but they know the hosts are operating illegally if they haven't applied for the proper permit, which is the Airbnb or bed and breakfast, which is approximately $4,200 to get that permit. They have not applied for that permit in the past. Airbnb is taking a large majority of the listings right now, 1,600. When you're calculating the value of your companies, when you have 1,600 listings, and you're trying to add value, and I'm saying the local property management companies have every right to be in the middle of this, but they're hesitating because they want to make sure it's approved and it's legal before they step in and do it, because they're long-term, they've been here, they have a lot to lose if they don't do that. And the reality is Airbnb is still up in the air. Are they operating illegally? Now, if you do a lot of research, a lot of people think they are because they're the enabler to the hosts, and they should not be setting it up to where this illegal activity is taking place. And I understand there's a lot of research to be done on this. I'm just saying that Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, you need to be very cautious on thinking that you can operate illegally and then getting people to push it through because you're making an effort to push it through illegally. And again, I am alleging that they may possibly be operating illegally, but that is to be looked at, and if they are, they need to be fined and possibly excluded from operating in this city for a certain amount of time. And that's my position. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lightning, I just have to say, I think you've got a hell of a point. And if Airbnb itself had been violating any laws that we had, then I would certainly agree with you that we should fine them. And I think it's unfortunate that we're in a position where, although they were benefiting from illegal activity, the only people we could come down on is the homeowners, as I understand it, as the mayor just said. But I think that your general point that we shouldn't be rewarding people who've been operating illegally without making them take some responsibility wherever legally possible, you're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Benjamin?
Oh, so any system always has people who are going to try to game those systems, and I'm sure you all are aware of that already. And it is already hard enough to try to get individual homeowners, for instance, my landlord, to know all the proper regulations and code enforcement and et cetera. What is more concerning is I have a neighbor who I'll not name explicitly who was discussing with his roommates using Airbnb as a method of running a brothel. And I expressed how that's not good for their long-term sanity and not good for their futures. But people will game the system or will be negligent, and it's a hard thing to sort of herd these cats into compliance a lot of the time. And I hope you guys spend some good time doing that. I see that the rental or the short-term rental market is kind of a zero-sum game. So the money that will be given to the homeowners is basically money that will be going away from the hoteliers. And I'm not sure if this has been taken into consideration with the Convention Center Hotel project, how this is going to affect the hoteliers, which do employ people. I'm sure you guys have excellent staff to figure that out. But there is also the very real fact that there's going to be another 750,000 people coming to this area in the next 20 years, and how do you accommodate those people? One of the ideas I passed along in the hackathon was, I know gentrification is brought up a lot, and obviously this Airbnb is going to push up rental prices. I thought what might be useful is to provide the mechanism where people whose rents or property taxes are getting out of control could form a real estate investment trust with a property developer, retain their home after a new condo is built to replace, one house with 4 or 5 condos. And if there's some sort of capital gains so that they would lose the house because they can't pay that capital gains tax, have some sort of like Mooney bond type capital gains exemption so that we can kind of infill a bit more effectively without pushing people out and lower those rental forces. Because as a native Oregonian, I'm even feeling the pressure. I want to stay here and live here and my entire life, but it's getting really expensive.
Can I ask you a question? We don't have a lot of good data nationally because it's a new phenomenon on the impact on the housing market. But you said 2 things. You said people could be pushed out, and you said likely that rents are going to go up. So can you just take 1 minute and tell us why you believe that is true?
Well, there's a finite supply of rental housing units. Basically, the hoteliers operate, and they run a kind of a higher end market, and the Airbnb is basically competing with them on price on the lower end scale of things. But in terms of a daily sort of rental, right? If I rent an entire house, me and my roommates probably each pay $500 a month, whereas my same landlord could just do Airbnb for all of the individual rooms and make triple or quadruple that amount, $50 a day, because it's so close to PSU and such. And he would be foolish not to. I mean, it would be in his logical self-interest. And I understand that he should have the ability and the right to do with his property as he wishes. But we ultimately need to address the finite amount of space that we have in the city and how best to utilize that. Otherwise, people are going to get pushed out who otherwise just want to be productive members of this community who can't find a place to live.
Thank you. Thanks. Mr. Walsh?
My name is Joe Walsh. I represent Individuals for Justice. On this item, we fully support everything Mr. Lightning has said, and that's why we're at the table, to lend support to what he said. There was a question that came up, and I don't have the answer to, maybe one of you do, and it was kind of touched on a little bit ago by Commissioner Fish, that if you have short-term rentals, does that affect the hotels that normally would rent out For instance, when I was working at Long Beach Naval Shipyard, when I first went there, I went to a motel and I rented a room for a month. It was a short-term rental, and they had special prices for the month. So you wouldn't have to pay $50 a day. It was something like $400 or $500 a month, which is reasonable. Is there any discussion on the impact of what that will do to motels and hotels on these short-term rentals? Because it would seem to me that it would undercut them. And I'm just curious, and it did come up, that question. We're in full support of what Mr. Lightning is saying, and we also think that this should pass. But it seems like there's some loose ends here, and I'm curious if anybody did any work saying to the hotels and motels, okay, will this impact you? And what percentage of short-term rentals do you have exceeding, say, 30 days? Because that's the area that you're going to impact with this. So that was a curious question. I didn't have the answer to it, so maybe somebody else
Yeah, I
can
don't think-
simplify it and I can take it back.
Yeah, I don't think we have a complete answer because nobody's done, it's kind of hard to disprove a negative, even in economic analysis, but nobody's done that kind of exhaustive economic analysis that I know of on this issue. We have a little bit of anecdotal evidence on the hotel side, which is that hotel occupancy rates in Portland are at an all-time, or at least recent low. They're doing great, even while this phenomenon of short-term rentals by websites is going on without benefit of permits. So, we know that the hotels are doing well and that there are 3 new hotels in the permit pipeline, I believe, at the moment. Mr. Scarlett is nodding, yeah. So now those tend to be in the central city. The hotels tend to be in the central city, the new ones, I mean, where the Airbnb and other hosts are located is, of course, much more broadly distributed across the city, and may have more an effect on the neighborhood scale motel than it does on the downtown hotel. But that's anecdotal evidence, not scientific evidence. That's what we know.
I'm still confused.
I am
So
too.
I'm going to take back this answer and correct me if I'm wrong. You don't know.
We don't know, but the evidence seems to be that the hotel industry is largely unaffected by this phenomenon in Portland.
So, and there's 2 further
Yeah,
points.
right now, but if you legalize it, it's not going to decrease.
Right, but the question is, how much does it increase? We don't know.
And that's one of the reasons that I inserted the requirement for a report in September of 2016. So that's one of the things that we'll be looking at. The other point is that the taxes that are paid on these short-term rentals will go to the same places that the other hotel and motel taxes go to, which includes the Visitor Development Fund. And the Visitor Development Fund is targeted more to hotel occupancy rather than to private rentals.
Okay, let me ask you this question, Commissioner. If you find out by doing this research and coming back in 2016 that this is devastating to the motels, would you take a different position, all of you?
Well, that's one of the reasons that I specifically put the date before the end of my term in office so that I will be here to take action if necessary.
Okay, I'll take that back.
Thank you. Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. My name is Laura Rogers, and I wrote each of you, and thank you for getting back to me so quickly. I was impressed. I am opposed to not the 1 and 2 bedroom, and thank you for that, limiting it to 1 to 2 bedrooms, and thank you for requiring that the owner occupy the house for 270 days. I am very grateful for that. We have a house in our neighborhood, just a few houses for me. They rent out a house up to 10 people. They're not there. They haven't been there. They could make over $100,000 a year by renting this out. It can occupy up to 10 people, and we're in a nice little family neighborhood on east side of Mount Tabor in the Montevilla area, and there's trash, there's noise, and I'm concerned about, and I've read your bill, I've read the whole thing all the way through. You notify the people contiguous and across the street. My concern is, please notify all the neighbors, both blocks, I think on either side. The garbage affects all of us. There is a quiet German couple that lives next door to this house. They will never complain, but they are actually getting physically sick over the noise and the parties and everything. They're too shy to complain. I'm not shy to complain, so I'm down here kind of representing. I've spoken to everybody on my block. Some can't come from work and everything, but we're concerned about not the 1 and 2 bedrooms and occasional renting, but if they get pay the $4,000 or whatever to have a house rented, you really are losing control. And to me, it's losing the family neighborhood. It's more of a hotel rental. So my opposition is to the bigger things. Could you notify, and if you notify us, it's just a notification. There's no recourse for us to do. So you tell me, okay, I'm going to do this, but then there's no recourse for me to say, to make sure they stay in their zone. So thank you for amending it and changing it, but I am concerned about what potentially can happen with more people being in a home.
Thank you. If you have a minute while you're here, I hope you talk to Mr. Scarlett there in the front row about the code enforcement process that is available for
I
that
am aware of
situation.
it, and I've already made my concerns known through the code enforcement. I have the number, thank you.
Good, thank you. Thanks very much. Anyone else?
Ask staff? a
Yes,
question?
Sandra, could you come
We have
back?
one more testifier.
Oh,
One more
another-
testifier is Steve Entwisle.
Come on up.
Whistle. Senior.
Good morning, Council. My name is Stephen Entwistle, and I'm with Individuals for Justice. And this Airbnb and the change of the law in order to benefit this rental issue, how is this going to affect people living in public housing? And are their rents going to go up? In San Francisco, there's been a lot of gentrification over the last 10 years or so. There's a lot of homeless in San Francisco as a result of this. Quite frankly, I would estimate there would be, within a couple of years, we're going to have another 10,000 homeless on our streets if this passes and the rents and people get gentrified out and they go on the street. Not only that, we're going to have more hungry kids because parents are going to lose their places, they're going to lose their homes, they're going to lose their jobs. Okay, we don't have a safety net to protect these folks. Okay, and you can just look at the history of San Francisco and what they've been going through. Take a real hard look at that and look and see if this is really the right thing to do for Portland. Okay, we don't know how to deal with homeless here in Portland. That's obvious. I'm out here every day seeing the results, and it's not getting any better. We're using the wrong fork for the salad when it comes to homelessness, and this is going to be a proven deal breaker for folks that are really trying to work hard to keep afloat. And this is an anchor. It's going to sink them down to the ground, to the bottom. There's going to be more suicides, too. We don't know how to deal with that either. The city has a lot of issues they don't really know how to deal with, and now we're making the problem worse. I know it's not a very cheerful comment, but I'm just seeing what's already taken place in other cities, and it's coming here. And we're not prepared for it. What are we going to do with another 10,000 homeless that we don't even know what to do with the 3,500 that we have now? Anyway, that's all I need to say. Thank you.
You asked a great question. If I can just, I think it's worth clarifying something.
Go ahead.
When you say public housing, I take it you mean more broadly affordable housing.
Well,
Because
if-
this has no impact on public housing, meaning housing administered by HUD or the Housing Authority. That's regulated housing. People cannot sublet and participate. This has no impact on multifamily housing. We've deferred that issue, so apartment buildings, things like that, and subsidized housing, it's not allowed. This is people's homes. That's not public housing, but I would agree with you that the units, the rooms in those houses are part of an inventory of affordable housing. And that for some people, that's the only way they can afford to live in our city is to rent a room in a house. And a concern that we do have is that in taking those units offline, it may actually create a problem, which is why Dan and I have an idea we're pressing in connection with this. But sometimes language trips us up. Public housing per se, that's a term of art, is not covered by this. This was not allowed in public housing.
I understand.
But affordable housing to the extent we think of those rooms in someone's house as being a first place that someone can afford to live in our city,
I understand
they
that.
will be impacted, and that is a concern.
I'm just going by the results in San Francisco with public housing down there after all this came to pass, okay? I don't think we're protected here. I think that's a false analogy. I mean, the results, like I say,
Steve, I'm agreeing with you. I'm not drawing a false, I'm agreeing with you.
The
I
proof
just-
is going to be in the pudding, okay? The future is in jeopardy for a lot of people, and we don't need more homeless folks on the street, okay? We need to lift them up, not push them down and out in the street. That's all.
I'm just saying, I agree with you, but technically, public housing is not regulated here, so that area is protected.
I understand
Affordable-
that, but the results are, okay? If that's the case, then what happened to San Francisco?
San Francisco, first of all, is not affordable to people below middle class.
Oh, not
anyway.
anymore.
And second, the market forces that are encouraging people to take units offline and participate in the shared economy are meaning fewer units for people that can afford them. And that should be a concern of the city.
The shared economy is only shared by a certain percentage of people. It's not everybody, okay? We have a very unequal, the gap between the rich and the poor in this country is growing, okay? And this doesn't help. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else that wants to speak on the amendment? If not, then this is, because we've acted on amendments today, this rolls over to second reading and adoption next week.
I have another question. I have a
Okay,
question for
please.
staff, please.
Okay, I'm sorry, you did. I forgot. Come on up, Senator.
I just wanted to follow up on Ms. Rogers' question about notification. Does the proposed ordinance require notification at the neighborhood association?
Yes, it does. I'll recognize organizations, which would be the Neighborhood Association, the Business Association, and the Neighborhood Coalition Office.
Another good reason to participate in one's neighborhood association, because then even if you are a little beyond the personal notification, you would find out through the neighborhood association.
Correct.
Thank you.
Good, thank you, good point. Other questions? Please.
Yes, and there's an embarrassing question because I should know the answer to this, and maybe it's for Paul or for one of my colleagues rather than Sandra, but I think that we had agreement that we were going to take up Mr. Unger's suggestion that part of a permit for being a short-term rental host was going to be that you'd have to agree in any advertising that you would list your permit number. And I cannot for the life of me remember how exactly we memorialized that concept.
We memorialized it in both the ordinance and on the last page of Exhibit A, page 51, an amendment to Title VI, which says that the operators of a Type A or Type B accessory short-term rental permit must include their permit number or conditional use case file number as applicable in all advertising and other listed services, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you.
Your suggestion was adopted.
Yes.
All right. Other questions for Senator?
I have a comment. It's not a question, so. I just, the testimony today, I think underscores sort of how vexing the shared economy is for people like myself who are just sort of beginning to absorb all of its implications. And while I welcome Airbnb and other organizations that provide for the shared economy, and I welcome this ordinance that provides a path for homeowners and Airbnb to legally operate within our zoning code and to begin to pay lodging taxes. It is a double-edged sword. We've heard in testimony that Airbnb allows people to get external sources of revenue from rental incomes that help them pay their property taxes, help them stay in their houses. But as we just heard testimony today, and I think as Commissioner Fish and I both share this concern, we also know that it's going to ultimately diminish the number of rooms for rent. And that is something, and that is why we have proposed, and we will bring back a proposal on August 6th to dedicate the incremental lodging tax generated from these Airbnb and other short-term rentals to the Housing Investment Fund so that we can increase the supply of affordable rental housing. There's a clear nexus here. And while the impact may not be large to start with, the number of units may not be large, it's going to grow over time. And as we heard in testimony, we have a crisis of affordable rental housing. We need to dedicate this incremental lodging tax to the Housing Investment Fund, and we will bring back the proposal that was brought back earlier. We'll bring it back on August 6th for a council decision on that.
Mayor, if I could also add a comment. I will not be here next week. I'll be helping my daughter get ready for her senior year in college. But had I been here, I would have voted yes on this substitute. I think the work that's been done in the single-family context has been very thoughtful, from the Planning Commission, Bureau of Development Services, the hearings we've held, the council discussion. In fact, I think it's a model of how we do our best work in a collegial way, getting to the point where all 5 members of council are comfortable moving forward. And that, I think, should always be our goal. And so I think on the single-family context, we've got it right. And I really appreciate the amendments which my colleagues have offered, which I think have greatly strengthened this legislation and potentially set a framework for how other cities can address this issue as well. So I won't be here to cast my vote, but were I here, I would proudly vote yes. So thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Well, Sandra, again, thank you for good work on this issue. It's been a big project for you and for the Planning Bureau. Of course, we're not done because we have other elements of this to talk about. And then if we thought this one was easy, we're going to be wade into the thicket, I expect, soon on the question of our perhaps antiquated taxi cab regulation system and the fact that the shared economy and the internet is running rings around us there too. So ready or not, here's the future, and we have to deal with it. I think the goal of having the zoning code at least deal with this issue has been met, but we're not done with trying to catch up to an economy that's doing things quickly and very differently in ways that our traditional regulations haven't always anticipated. So thank you. Appreciate your good work.
Thank you.
Okay, this passes to second reading for next week.
I will announce the date and time. It'll
Okay.
be past the second reading, July 30th, regular agenda at 9:30.
Okay, thank you. All right, then let's move to item 780.
$780, accept bid of $1,118,186 from Insight2Form Technologies LLC for the Middle Hillsdale RDII project, pilot project in Bureau of Environmental Services.
Good morning.
Good morning. Christine Moody, Procurement Services. You have before you a procurement report recommending a contract award to Institute-Form Technologies for the Middle Hillsdale RD2 pilot project. The engineer's estimate on this project was $1 million. On June 19, 2014, one bid was received, and Institute-Form Technologies is the low bidder at $1,118,185. The city identified 4 divisions of work for potential minority, women, and emerging small business subcontracting opportunities. Subcontracting participation on this project is at 21.3%, and they are responsive to the good faith efforts requirements. I will turn this back over to council if you have any questions about the bidding process.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, the situation is one on its face that you might not call it a success, in that we had one bid and it was 10% over the engineer's estimate. So what do we make of this situation? We're in a great, maybe it's because it's a great construction environment, we only got one bid, but ouch.
There were 6 prime bidders that attended the mandatory pre-bid meeting. I think you did make a point, though. Over the last few months, we have been seeing the number of bids we've been receiving go down.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor, we had a bid in Parks that didn't get any respondents, and I think that this perhaps represents a watershed moment in that for the past 5 years, we've been seeing bids come in way under the estimate because of the economy and companies being desperate for work. And now it's sometimes you can't pay people to do the work because there aren't enough folks out in the community able to do the job. So perhaps we'll see if this does begin a trend, but I certainly appreciate getting the bid that is close to the estimate, and would assume that there wouldn't be any increases to this amount paid unless something unforeseen comes up during construction.
If I could add one thing to what you said, Commissioner Fritz. We took a tour recently to go look at the work that's occurring on Swan Island at Vigor, and they told us that they are having to recruit out of state certain classifications of workers to fill the back orders. They have so much work they can't fill it with the local workforce. We heard the same thing recently from Willie Myers, the head of the Columbia Pacific Building Trades. where, unlike 4 or 5 years ago, where they would come before us and say they're at 30% unemployment in certain trades. He's at 100% in certain trades, and again, looking outside of Oregon to bring skilled people in. So it's one of the benefits of a booming economy, where there's a lot of construction going on. But I too remember the days when, and particularly around housing, where there was so little work that we actually had big firms bidding for small projects, and the problem there was they were displacing the smaller firms that often got that work. So the market acts in strange ways. I think the key here, though, is that to hear from you, Christine, that you're satisfied that we followed all of our procedures and got the best possible bid. That's what we need to know, that you're satisfied that that's the case.
That's correct. They were responsive to all of our requirements.
So this conversation may already be underway between you and the operating bureaus, but if we are seeing around the corner here a little bit, maybe folks need to start revising their engineers' estimates to deal with the fact that we're not in a buyer's market anymore. So that may already be taken into account in BES and elsewhere, but.
Mayor, from your mouth to God's ears.
Yeah.
And because we often get dinged, as you know, as a city, where someone goes back and says, well, there's already a cost overrun between the engineer's estimate and the bidding. And the truth is, the estimate means nothing until you put it out in the marketplace and find out what someone will bid for that work. So it is just a guesstimate.
Yeah. Well, not only do we not have the power at this dais to change the past, but we don't have the power to change reality. So if that's reality, then we ought to take it into account and not set our bureaus or anyone else up for saying, see, you're over your estimate again. So people should take that into account. Houses cost more, construction costs more. Oh, well, that means our projects are going to cost more. We might have to do less of them than we would have done with the same capital budget before, but can't distort reality.
Christine, I completely agree with the mayor's comment. And that's hard, though, to get across to some of our engineers, because they sharpen their pencil and say, yeah, but this is what it ought to cost. And what it ought to cost doesn't necessarily take into consideration what the market says it will cost. So in light of the mayor's excellent comment, could you make sure you follow up with the 3 infrastructure bureaus and reinforce that message to PBOT, BES, and Water, that we should start taking into account market dynamics and doing those engineer estimates?
Okay, let the record know. Let the record show we instructed all of our engineers that hope is not a strategy. Got it?
And I appreciate you bringing that up, because this has been a topic of conversation, and I don't want to forget parks and facilities to be included in that discussion.
I didn't mean to leave parks out.
But I think it is a good point that we need to look at where the market is right now, and look at where our estimates are coming from, and making sure that we're accurate when we're putting those bids out on the street.
Good.
Thank you. Appreciate being able to have that discussion based on this project, but obviously this one is, we've got what we've got. Okay, anyone want to speak on this item? If not, then a motion to adopt the report. Second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Fritz.
Thank you for attending the hearing. Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Hales.
Aye. Okay. Item 781, second reading.
781, authorize a 5-year contract with Schweers Technologies, Inc. to provide handheld parking enforcement hardware, software, and services for a total of $1,057,847.
Roll call.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Fritz.
I wasn't here for the public hearing for this or the other second readings that we're considering today. My staff have looked over the proposals and given me a thorough report, so I do feel competent to vote on each of these, and I'm happy to vote aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Hales.
Aye. 782.
Accept the Old Town Chinatown 5-year action plan and authorize modifications to the System Development Charge Exemption Program.
Our PDC staff is coming forward. Just want to reset the context for this. We had a great hearing last week with great testimony from the community that developed this plan. That's really important as a frame of reference. This is a community-built plan supported by the Portland Development Commission, not a PDC plan that someone else has sort of passively signed off on. These are their ideas. and I think they're good ideas. I think this plan is a cause for celebration, not hand-wringing. This is a time when we can take advantage of the development market that we've just been talking about this morning and finally make something happen. Steve, you quoted one song last week. I think we need another brick in the wall here. Actually lay one brick on another in Old Town Chinatown, because at the current rate of development, in about 300 years, we'll build out this plan. So I'd like to see more activity, and that's exactly what this package is intended to generate, and the kind of balance for the neighborhood that they've wanted all along. It's interesting that our next item on the council calendar is a very wonderful project, but a $6 million affordable housing project in Old Town Chinatown. Great, we're good at that, but we need to be good at a number of other kinds of changes in Old Town Chinatown, and that's what this plan is about. So I think all of us are ready to see activity, ready for us to see realization of this plan, and are not content to do nothing and hope. So I'm very excited about this plan. We have had a good discussion about the systems development charge exemption and some good suggestions from council members. So hearing that concern, I want to put on the table a proposed amendment that will allow, that would add 5 more years of affordability, that is of incomes up to 120% of median for the 5 years that follow the initial 10-year window for people at 100% of MFI. So I would like to propose that amendment. Council has copies, and if we can get a second for that, we can put it on the table. So roll call to put that on the table.
Aye.
Novick?
Aye.
Fritz?
I think this is even worse than the original proposal. No.
Hales?
Aye. Okay, amendments on the table.
Thank you.
Patrick,
I'm
did
sorry,
you not get the
I
vote?
missed-
I think he
He's a student of the Tip O'Neill School of the Gavel. It's, no need to record my vote, but had I been asked, I would have respectfully voted no. But I do have a question, if it's now laid before us.
Okay.
I'm familiar, Patrick, with our 60-year affordability covenants on the affordable side. And by the way, the project we're about to take up in Old Town Chinatown actually has market rate units as part of the mix. But the so I'm familiar with locking in 60 years and why we do that, and it's partly to make sure we get a fair public return on the public investment. Why in the additional 5 years would we go up to 120%? And practically, what does that mean to existing tenants if we open it up to 120% in that 5-year window?
Well, first off, we have one perspective and one set of kind of observations on this. I know there was a lot of conversation among the 5 of you over the course of the week about this as well. So I think there's other perspectives to add on this. I think what we were trying to do is respond to concerns about this, like 10 years, and then it just opens up, and I don't think any of us can really predict what will happen after that. It could be that maybe the market is at a place where rents would just jump. It could be that we're still in the same place we are, or have incremental improvements and no restrictions are necessary. But I think we're trying to think about what if after 10 years that there really is an opportunity to raise rents significantly, what would that do? And so this was to provide kind of an additional period of time, a buffer, so that property owners could realize some benefit from rising rents, and you wouldn't have this cliff, but to still provide a time horizon by which the restrictions would be lifted, and it would make sense for developers to make use of the SDC waiver now. But I don't think we know that there's a perfect answer to this, to what's the right time horizon. I think this was just an attempt to maybe soften the cliff if in fact we are in a market 10 years out where rents could jump significantly. You do have it also does provide protection against existing tenants, so that after 10 years, if there is a rent increase, it would definitely be limited to just going from 100 to 120%. Or whatever, wherever it is. But truly, like I said, there was conversations among individuals on the council about this as well.
I know you've been talking to developers and looking at pro formas to see, what will actually create the spark that then creates the development. Has this idea of the additional 5 years and the income range been vetted with the development community?
We had very limited conversations, and the feedback we've had is essentially keep it simple. And it's hard to say based on the limited opportunity we've had to have discussions of what time frame becomes a fatal flaw, but it's more of keeping the mechanisms of the program is simplified among tracking requirements over whatever time frame is identified.
And the other thing we did was there was an idea of making it 130% or some other number, but the folks at housing said, look, we track 100%, 120% MFI on some units, so let's use a metric that we already use. So we also adjusted it for that reason, just to make the administration of it more simple.
And is there some model that you've used to try to calibrate public investment versus public benefit? We've made a judgment when we put lots of resource, well, we put not lots, in the preservation side, we put $1 in, it's a 60-year affordability. So in fact, we've demanded 60 years of certainty for very small amounts of investment. Here we're talking about a reasonable amount of investment and substantially below the 60-year threshold. Commissioner Saltzman has spoken very eloquently. He wants to see entry-level workers, certain classifications of employees being able to live downtown. I'm just curious why we don't think this model works with maybe 15 years at 100%.
You can answer.
I think it would vary significantly by project to project of the amount of SDCs that are waived relative to the time period. And so we didn't have an opportunity to run kind of that analysis over what time capping rents or keeping rents at a reduced rate are you negating the value of the SDCs, the net present value of those dollars. So we didn't have an opportunity to kind of do a sensitivity test on multiple versions, but we were trying to find that balance of what is the public investment relative to when does it no longer become desirable to a developer and when is it no longer providing value.
And once again, I think the context here is very unique. The public benefit, if you will, that we're trying to create through this is the construction of market rate housing units. So we're trying to get to the point where market rate housing units will get built in this neighborhood and create the kind of income diversity that we all believe makes for healthy neighborhoods. We all cited an article last week that suggested that neighborhoods with high concentrations of poverty have poor outcomes. So we're trying to get income diversity. So we want to get to a market rate dynamic more quickly. So it's a slightly different model than kind of having, this kind of long-term income restriction. It's meant to spur a small amount of activity to get us to a market rate dynamic, knowing that 70% of the units right now are income restricted. Right. So we're kind of in this. It's like this kind of reverse dynamic we're trying to deal with, which I don't think really exists almost anywhere else in the city.
Patrick, one other question, and I was thinking about this morning, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't know the answer. So currently, we tax, let's say it's a parking lot or just a vacant piece of dirt. That gets taxed as unimproved dirt, right? Yep. It's taxed at an assessed value of whatever unimproved dirt is. If this is successful and someone builds a building on that dirt, then the improvements are now going to be subject to property taxes, correct? And so that new value of that investment is subject, but it's within an urban renewal district. So do those new property taxes flow to you or to the city and county?
Well, it flows to it flows to pay off. It's downtown waterfront. It flows to pay off the debt on downtown waterfront, and so it would hopefully accelerate the pay down of that debt. Or in River District, it would be tax increment that would be used for a combination of both paying down existing debt and new borrowing. So it would be, so the analysis that we did and presented to you as part of the urban renewal amendments, the timelines we showed you, that's the timeline that would exist. It wouldn't change for when those dollars would free up and come back to the city, the county, the schools.
So if this is successful, it'll generate property tax revenues that will go to PDC to cover debt on the district. Mm-hmm. And in this case, though, we're not putting TIF into these projects.
Yeah, I don't think it's precluded, but the intent is, once again, to make the best use of our resources, to have TIF kind of focused on working with existing buildings. If these projects can pencil with just a small SDC waiver, then that, I think that's a good outcome. So our intent is not to double up, but I just can't predict that we're not going to come across an existing building, housing project that brings market rate units on, but it still needs seismic work or something. So it would be that kind of situation where I think there might be TIF in some of those projects.
Well, and this isn't theoretical, and part of my context for believing this is absolutely the right thing to do is I've been to a lot of ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings in the last few weeks, and they're all right outside of the boundaries of this district, but they're inside of one or more urban renewal districts. So hooray, the new hotel is opened next to Union Station, just outside of Old Town Chinatown. That value will go into this PDC revenue stream to pay off the River District bonds until the River District is sunsetted. We've sunsetted 30% of it, but we've still got 70%.
Right, if we're spending money on a parcel, you can assume that assessed value is
So
locked
that's
in urban
going on
renewal.
literally every
Yeah.
day. There's somebody just broke ground on a new office building in the Pearl District. We're in discussions about other major development projects just outside of the boundaries of Old Town Chinatown. If this was auditory, there's a roar all around this district and silence inside in terms of private market rate activity that puts new assessed value on the tax rolls. So this is to get maybe just a little bit of sound.
I guess
500 units worth of sound.
I guess
in this district.
the question of whether we need to prime the pump is not in dispute on this council. The question is what's the tool we use to generate it. And it's interesting, I hadn't thought about this point, but we're doing SDC waivers, which means those dollars will not be available for the purposes they were intended if we're successful and get development. But the development will then in turn generate new property tax revenues, which are not contemplated to be used to refund the SDC waivers, but instead to go into the pot to cover other things. So in my mind, it's slightly out of whack. I've made my point about color of money and the use of SDCs. I'm not going to continue to dig that hole. I don't have the support of council to change that, but I did previously suggest that an approach would be to either defer SDCs or to have a mechanism where they're reimbursed out of whatever is generated in the project. That's different than saying whether we want development or not. It's saying that we're going to make SDCs whole. I don't have support for that idea either, but I'm at least interested in this idea because this is billed as a test case and as a pilot. And if this is a pilot, I have a particular interest in making sure we've thought through all the implications, because a pilot sometimes migrates.
I would also note that the SDC waivers only apply to the portion of the project that is residential and only the residential units that meet these income requirements. Right. So the commercial components of a project ground for retail or additional residential units that might be above these income limits would continue to pay SDCs.
Correct.
Okay. Point. Other questions for staff? Great. Thank you both. Do we have folks signed up to testify on the amendment?
3 signed up, Joe Walsh, Lightning, and Charles Johnson. Would you please come up?
Come on up. Mr. Walsh, you're first.
My name is Joe Walsh, representing Individuals for Justice for the Record. We would just restate our objections that we brought up last week and put it on the record. We see the threat that's in this report where it says, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have it in front of me, that they see as a threat social services in the community. Not homelessness, not houselessness, but social services. That, to me, indicates an attitude, like I said last week. Doesn't seem that anybody is interested in taking that out. We heard testimony last week from a woman that said, we wouldn't do that. Yes, you would, because you steal from the poor, Mayor. You take their blankets. This 5-year, now extended to 10-year in some instances, is going to make a very clean little section of Portland. And the homeless are not going to be welcome here. They say that in their threats. If they can see the threat, why can't they come up with an alternative or a response to it? Why don't the developers, as Mr. Lightning has said, as I said last week also, come up with some money to do something? If you're going to give them tax breaks, why in God's name don't you include, okay, folks, you want these tax breaks, come up with a plan of what we do with the guy that is homeless, is in your hallway, you don't know what to do with him. What do we do, and what are you willing to put up to do it? Nothing in here. You should be ashamed of this. How the hell can you get past that language? Social services is a threat. Salvation Army is a threat. Catholic Charities is a threat. And you're going to just ram this down. Well, let me tell you, we will watch this really closely, and we will bury you if you screw around with the homeless any more than you're doing now. You steal from the homeless, Charlie. How the hell do you sleep at night?
That's a tough one to follow. My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Think Lab. One of the things I want to stress is that I think we all want to see Old Town, Chinatown developed and improved. And after some of the other speakers last week kind of said, I need to respect the historical value, I need to respect the history, I do agree with you on that. And I do agree with you. And that's why I'm speaking now, is that I have a tremendous amount of respect for the history and the people. But when I look at a building, I see a building. There may be a lot of memories, a lot of history behind that building, who the owners were and the different things they did throughout the city. And I respect that. I respect the history. I'm a real history buff. I love to read everything about the buildings. But I look at the people laying out on the sidewalks and the doorways, and then I look at that building, and I put at the top of the list the people. That is where I focus on. That is what I want to see the most improvement. I look at that person laying in the doorway on that sidewalk, and I say, you know what? I want to see your life improve. I want to see you being provided incentives and different things to maybe do a little bit better, do as good as you can. And so I love the history, but I want to take care of the people, and that's my first concern. Now, are we going to have some displacement of people? Do a lot of people maybe want to, let's move the homeless and maybe go to the east side with them? The reality is we need to provide them housing. When you look out on the sidewalks and the doorways and you're in Old Town, Chinatown, that is your responsibility. You've been in the neighborhood a lot longer than I have. It's your responsibility to take that in consideration when large amounts of money are going into these buildings and you know that person on that sidewalk in that doorway doesn't even have a chance to get in that housing unit. You know it, I know it, it's not affordable, it's not going to happen. So we need to look at that. You either clear them out of the area or we figure out another type of housing facility to put them in. We have to, if we displace, we have to replace. If the population is higher than the housing units out there, we need to build more. The reality is the people come first. The building is nothing to me but a bunch of brick, a bunch of concrete, and you know what? If you love that building so much, you would have taken care of that building for the last 30 years and not let it go so dilapidated and boarded up. And look at the people sleeping in front of your buildings. Why not try to fix that building up over the years and put them into housing instead of create homelessness by you being a slumlord? You are a slumlord in denial, and that's what creates homelessness. And if you want to think your building is so much better than that person laying on the sidewalk, I disagree with you, and I have no respect for you if that's what you believe in. Thank you.
Thanks. Charles?
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Charles Johnson. And I might be happy if I'd been more involved in this process, but I do consider myself more familiar than most people with the Old Town, Chinatown neighborhood, the huge amount of real estate owned and operated by Central City Concern in that area. Yesterday, just as I was sitting and preparing to make my remarks, I thought about the odd situation we have with an unknown number of people sleeping every night on Burnside sidewalks. The Portland Rescue Mission, the Union Gospel Mission, Right to Dream 2 happen to be in this area. And no matter how many glossy 21-page PDC pie in the sky documents we produce, there's going to be a homeless problem in this city for one economic development area or another until the city's elected leadership finds a solution other than spending police resources on pushing people around from one sidewalk in one development area to another. Some cities have done it without doing a public agency, but in reality, since your goal seems to be to placate developers, you need to tell them to step up to the plate and build yourselves a Department of Homeless Services like the City of New York has, and have emergency shelter space equal to the number of people that are sleeping in Old Town Chinatown. Instead of sending cops out there to push them around in and out of one economic development center, have the police count them, find out who owns the beautiful dirt pile on the east side, south by the Hawthorne Bridge, set up a public-private partnership, a fully city-run thing, slightly more structured and better, with more involved social work management like Right to Dream 2, and don't tell these people that they have to sit and sleep on the sidewalk night after night as pawns of various developers. I know it's a difficult thing to do in the budget, but the problem with this Old Town Chinatown plan and other plans is that you don't accept basic human dignity as the foundation where you start. You have to take the money, you have to squeeze the service agencies, you have to make a place where you have enough beds for homeless people to not sleep on the sidewalk in front of service providers. The service providers are not the problem. We, as a community, are the problem. We're not taking seriously this issue of hundreds of people sleeping in doorways at the time. It's currently convenient for us to stick them in doorways on Northwest 4th, Northwest 3rd, but in reality, they need to be in a hygienic, even if it's a tent city, it needs to be someplace with hygiene equipment and food service, accessible to downtown social service areas, and not impairing access through the sidewalks. And people don't want to live by that. We can't change that. Nobody wants to live in a house where they have to step over somebody that's asleep when they come and go at night. So I wish, as I think Commissioner Fritz did with her vote, that we had put more into this plan to actually solve the real problem of desirability and human dignity in our neighborhoods, downtown neighborhoods. Thank you.
Charles, you might want to stick around and testify on the next item, because the next item is a loan of $6,339,093 to develop 52 affordable and 10 market rate units in this neighborhood. $6,339,093. So to characterize the city of Portland as only focusing police on this issue is not accurate.
Thank you. I do have my fingers crossed for that project, and that hopefully it will be successful, and we'll see more. And I know steps are being made, but we can see, I don't even do it myself. I just walk past these people and I feel sorry for them, but I'm almost scared to say 1, 2, 3, 79 people as I walk from the Burnside Bridge to 6th Avenue, and to know that we have yet to figure out how we're going to get people and money together to get them in a better place.
Charles, one last thought. I'm about to go to Los Angeles, take my daughter to college. There are 50,000 unsheltered people in Los Angeles. 50,000. And the current debate in Washington goes about something like this. $40 billion in our budget at the federal level for housing that meets the needs of people priced out of the market. $200 billion for housing that funds middle income and above through the consequence of the mortgage interest deduction, and the property tax deduction, so foregone revenue. We spent $200 billion subsidizing stable housing for middle-income people, and $40 billion to cover everyone who is priced out of the market. 50,000 people last night slept in a shelter in New York. 50,000 are on the streets in Los Angeles. I think every once in a while it's worth keeping in perspective that in Portland, in the last 10 years, we've moved 12,000 people from the streets to homes, and we put general fund money behind our deeds. It is not enough, but every time people come before this council and blast the council for not doing enough, they are fulfilling a prophecy that Newt Gingrich had when he started underfunding these programs at the federal level, because he knew it would lead to cannibalizing at the local level, and then we would have these kinds of conversations. And we all wish we could do more. I'm proud to be on a council that takes 30% of urban renewal money and puts it into housing. I'm proud to be on a council that puts general fund money in housing. But to be honest, the kind of housing that we are trying to solve is a national problem. It is not a Portland problem. And with all due respect, we could take every penny of our budget, and we still can't compensate for the fact that the federal government is not investing the necessary resources to address a national crisis. And that's not, I don't say this because I want you to come before us and give anyone on this panel a pat on the back. You're an advocate, and you'll never be satisfied, and that's why you're effective. But we ought to put it in some context, and we also ought to recognize that the city has a lot to be proud of in terms of its record in this area. But if the federal government doesn't view it as a priority, and this is not a heresy, but I'm going to say it for the record, we cannot solve the problem. We cannot. We are Portland. We cannot solve a national problem, and we should stop kidding ourselves. Until this is viewed as a national priority, Portland, Oregon is not going to solve this problem.
Thank you, Commissioner. I do, in my earlier remarks, I mentioned federal and state involvement. We talked about the tragedy of hungry children, and I do regret that I didn't get a chance to point out the federal issue. RAP Home, the Western Regional Advocacy Project, their documentation always features the fact that basically there was, since Reagan, a federal war on the poor with the unintended or intended consequence of pushing them out on the street. So I'm very glad, Commissioner Fish, that you do raise this issue, that we need to look at the federal funding and tax structures and make sure that more federal money, however we can, gets channeled into places where it used to be, doing what it needed to do. So thank you for that.
That we certainly agree. Thank you.
May I
Barbara.
speak?
Yes, please.
So as I see it, there's
Give us your name again, Ben.
Oh, my name is Benjamin Barber. Sorry for that. As I see it, there's three main concerns. One is whether or not you're socializing losses to privatize gains. And I think perhaps having some stipulations on who gets the money, as you've done, is a wise move. I'd like to see more PDC money go to maybe sustainability B Corps that are forming real estate ventures. And then whether or not we need to prime the pump and how best to prime the pump. And I had this idea about basically allowing people who are in big homes, who can't afford them, to bring themselves into real estate deals, and that might help with some of that. And then another thing is about the homeless and how to best serve the homeless and where to place them. And I'm reminded of Rawls' theory of justice, which some of you may or may not know about. I see that the reason why having them in the Central City Core is good, because it lowers the consumer price index for their entire budget and allows them to sustain their lifestyle. So their transportation costs will be extremely lower. At the same time, I do understand why they're saying having mixed income and bringing revenue into the area is also important. And it is a fine balancing act. If by promoting more business and promoting more income into the area, you're able to allocate that extra income to those needs of the homeless, that is completely fine and acceptable to me. I also had some speaking at the Zedell Property Yards. We talked about how to deal with the homeless. There's a large 33-acre property over there. Some ideas that were floated were temporary structures, where it'd be either shipping containers that were remodeled, or even 3D printing concrete buildings in partnership with the university system and Ross Island Sand and Gravel to make wood frame construction last century. I think that there are some innovative solutions to the problem of homelessness, but as Mr. Fish did point out, there's no way that we're going to solve it. And if we do solve it, everyone's going to send their homeless here, and then we'll be back to the problem of trying to solve it again. But I really do appreciate all of your hard work, and that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you both. Anyone else? Then, unless there's further questions or discussion, we're going to move this to second reading.
I have
for
a
next
question,
week.
Mayor, that one of the reasons this was, the public hearing was last week, excuse me, was that so that all 5 of us could be here at the vote. Commissioner Fish has mentioned that he's not here next week, so could we please move it to second reading to the vote at a time that we'd all 5 of us be here?
I think we can do that. What's the date that that's the case, Sue? That work? Right. Safe? Okay, then this will be on the second reading calendar for August 6th. Okay, thank you. Okay, next item, please.
$783, authorize a loan of up to $6,339,093 of River District Tax Increment funding to be used with funding from other sources to develop 52 affordable units and 10 market rate units in the Erickson Fritz Apartments.
Mr. Saltzman.
Well, Mayor, I think you've introduced this topic well, so I will now turn it over to Housing Bureau Director Tracy Manning and Innovative Housing's Director Sarah Stevenson. And I apologize, I don't know who our third person is, but keep it brief, okay? Very brief overview of this great affordable housing project.
Yes, this is a great affordable housing project, importantly with a great partner. It was selected through a competitive process, as you heard during the last item. Will include units starting those affordable to people at 0 to 30% of median income, and then all the way up to including 10 market rate units. It will leverage private investment from Raymond James, Wells Fargo, and our private but nonprofit affordable housing developers deferring some of their developer fee to make it work. They will utilize an historic tax credit and underutilized buildings in the neighborhood. They will nearly double their MWESB efforts, our target goals. They're going to be Earth Advantage Gold and utilize the Energy Trust. And they're building in a neighborhood that, as we've just heard, has a lot of great opportunities for anyone to live there. It is an amazing neighborhood that I very much appreciate. And given all of the conversation that we recently had, and despite all of this, and Innovative Housing truly being one of our best developers in town, I'm very familiar with Old Town myself, and the fact that the neighborhood has felt very strongly that the amount of affordable housing and social services in the neighborhood has perhaps reached a limit, and they wanted to try some other things. So when the project came in, I called the folks I know in Old Town and said, okay, they look like they have your support. You have told me time and again you want to diversify. Are you okay with this proposal? And sorry they aren't here to relay to you, but I have permission to relay to you that the folks in Old Town Chinatown have such faith and great experiences with Innovative Housing, and this fits very well into their goals, both of helping people off the street and having a vibrant neighborhood for everybody who lives there. So with that, and keeping it short, I just want to quickly acknowledge my team who worked on this. Javier Mena, John Marshall, who's in the audience, Michael Prothy, Mary Welch, and Kathy Romero, all at Portland Housing Bureau. And now the Director of Innovative Housing, Sarah Stevenson.
Well, and I have with me our Director of Development, Julie Garver, just in case you ask me any very difficult technical questions. Since I sent you the pro forma last week, I didn't know what you might come back with. I don't have a lot to add. I think everything that has been said is accurate. We are excited about this because our mission is to develop affordable housing. We are a committed member of the Old Town community. So when we heard from them that they wanted a greater income mix in residential development, we heard that. We developed the Modern Rich in 2012, which we is workforce, it's unrestricted workforce housing. When the Bill Nato Company saw what we did at the Rich Building, they approached us and said, can you do that at the Erickson Fritz buildings? We looked at it, it actually, yes, it's doable, and what does the neighborhood want? You know, they want some housing at 30%, housing for people who are working and want to live where they work, and market rate units. So we put it all in there. So we think this project, it's trying to meet a lot of different needs, and we think that we've done it. And we also think it's really important to revitalize what we see as a gateway parcel into Old Town. As people are crossing Burnside, we will be fronting on both 2nd and 3rd, and those are main corridors into the community. And right now, those are vacant buildings. So, you know, revitalizing those and really bringing those historic properties back to life, we see a lot of value in that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Tracy,
Wait,
wait.
Go ahead. Julie, anything to add?
Very briefly, I just wanted to say that when we were doing the appraisal work for the Erickson Fritz, the market rate units were a bit of a challenge because, as has been pointed out, there isn't a lot of comparable properties right within the neighborhood for market rate units. And so, so there was a stretch on figuring out how to make those work with the appraisal. So it will be nice when the next market rate project with market rate units comes into Old Town, they'll have our project to use as a comparable.
Great, thank you. Other questions?
I just want to state for the record that there's no connection between me and this project, despite the name.
It's honorary, it's honorary. Come
Well,
on.
I actually need to assign my staff to look into it. They have, however, dug out of the report that this used to be a saloon employing 50 bartenders and one of the longest bars in the country at 684 feet. It's quite impressive.
Hard to
The
imagine,
Erickson
684
Saloon.
feet.
Commissioner Fritz, Dan wasn't going to take any chances. He wanted 5 votes, and this is, after all, emergency, so he'll go to any length. Couple questions. Tracy, if you back out the community space and any of the non-residential space, you have a sense of roughly the per unit cost of the rehab?
I don't have it on me, but I see people with lots of paper in front of them.
Just ballpark.
I have a per unit cost, but it includes the community space and all the market rate units.
What do you have, Ben?
It's about $265,000 per unit, all in. What we've requested from the city is a subsidy of about $121,000 per affordable unit, because we're not asking the city to fund the market rate units.
120 per affordable. So
Right.
that's
That's what the request breaks down to if you divide it by 52.
And you anticipated, I guess, where I was going, which is you're reminding us that even with a seismic upgrade, the preservation and rehab of an existing building can be a better deal for the city than new construction. So this is at the lower end of what we would normally spend per door.
We think it's a good investment. I mean, the overall cost of the project, I think at $265,000 per unit, you know, that's a high price, but given the seismic, given the historic, and we, you know, it leverages historic tax credits to offset some of those costs, as you mentioned.
Tracy, I was struck by the mix of units. So when we think about the 10-year plan, the focus is on 0 to 30. We've got 2 units here. It's a population that generally is needs services in order to be successful. So that's one part of the community you're building. 50 and 60% MFI, which is 50 of the units, so the big chunk. Someone at 50 or 60% of MFI, according to your chart, at 60, they're going to pay just under $700 a month for a unit. That person might work where in the neighborhood? Just in rough terms?
Someone at 60% would earn about $30,000 a year
And
pre-tax.
So if we hope that they have a job in the neighborhood, they're working.
They could be entry level at one of the startup companies. They could be at Northwest Education Association. They could be
Part-time, they could work for Central City Concern.
Could be a student with parents who are willing to co-sign on something.
Well, not a full-time student,
No,
but.
no. And then,
or any of the entry-level service positions. I mean, as you heard last week, there are about 1,000 people working in the district within just the hospitality industry, so the restaurants and bars and clubs. You know, people who work full-time in those industries probably make maybe 50 to 60% of income,
Yeah.
area median.
Yeah.
So the overwhelming majority of the units that we'll be funding in this beautiful building, which I drive by every morning, we hope will support people that can also walk to work.
That's our goal. I mean, I get more calls about the Modern Rich is a half a block away. It's 34 studio apartments. We put that online in 2012. I get more calls from people asking about available units at that building than any of our other properties. So, when people question us, are you sure you're the appraiser? Are you sure you'll be able to rent these units? I know we'll be able to rent these units because I know people want to live in this neighborhood. People who go to school here part-time, people who work here, people who just want to be close to downtown and can't afford anything else in downtown. This is the neighborhood that they can be in, and we want to provide the opportunity.
Yeah, and Tracy, just one last question, and I'm going to enthusiastically support this. We have a big need at the very low end. That's where people are struggling. But your focus is 0 to 60, and that's the range that your bureau is concerned of. Why do you believe this investment and this many units at the higher end is a good deal for the city?
Well, I think it's absolutely meeting a need in the city, even up to 60%. And as you alluded to, we get, with sort of standard financing that we have available to us, this is a very similar profile to what we tend to get. Innovative Housing, in their last project, the Magnolia, did something very similar where they set aside a certain percentage of units. They work with Northwest Pilot Project, they work with Join at 0 to 30, and then subsidize those units with their higher rent units in the building. But without an additional rent subsidy, Section 8, that kind of thing, what we find is our partners aren't able to support additional 0 to 30 units. So in terms of the standard, the buildings that we want to finance with our resources when we're not including rent subsidy, this is exactly what we want to see.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for the team? Right. Thank you all very much. Is there anyone signed up to speak on this item?
We have Lightning.
Okay, Lightning, come on up.
My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Think Lab. First of all, I want to say I do commend the efforts on being quite creative on this deal. It's very impressive from start to finish. One of the things I think about is, are subsidies necessary to do a project like this? Well, you're going to say absolutely yes. And that's what's being done right now, so I'm not going to go against that. The $6,339,093 from the Portland Housing Bureau, which is considered a cash flow share loan, meaning that this will be paid off by the cash flow at 50% of the cash flow produced. In my opinion, you'll be lucky to see $1 of cash flow for the next 15 to 30 years. Now, you may dispute me on that, but you also have performers that might even almost agree with me on that. Now, with that in mind, my only concern is to make sure this, what I consider a loan and not a grant, is paid back in the future. I don't want in the future somebody coming up and saying, hey, we can't make any cash flow. If we're going to keep our affordable units affordable, guess what? We need your assistance again. Can you just write that loan off? Now, I notice, if I'm incorrect on this, that you don't have that loan placed against the property. Now, you can correct me on that, but it's placed against your limited liability partnership. Now, I don't know if that is just to keep the debt off the property, and I might be incorrect on that. Now, my only position is, if this building is refinanced, I'd like to see that loan paid off. If the building is sold, I'd like to see that loan paid off. I want to do on sale. My main focus is to make sure that if we're going to use public subsidies to build these projects, that they get paid back if it's necessary in the current agreement, which, as you know, this loan, this shared loan, is 0%, paid off the cash flow, And we all know that by the end of the day, to show a cash flow on a new building at low rents might be difficult, because it's always easy to push certain expenses up higher in other areas. So at the end of the day, you might not see cash flow. Now, my only other concern, like I say again, I commend you on your $1,875,000 development fee. That is impressive. And again, what I want to understand on this SDC waiver, is that only for new construction or properties that are being rehabbed? Because to me, this is like a rehab, although you're taking the inside of the building and doing all new. Does that fit under the terms of the SDC waiver to receive that? So I'm kind of curious on that. Is that new construction or older buildings being rehabbed? And it's my understanding this is an older building being rehabbed. Thank you.
Good questions. Might want to get some response to some of those. Due on sale clause, is there one? Okay. And I think I know the answer on the SDC question, which is that if you convert a building from one use to another, you pay the SDC based on the increased use, right?
Yeah, it's based on the change of use. So if you're adding fixtures or
units or
people using the property,
Yeah.
right? And so the waivers are for the affordable portion of the building.
I just wanted to point out, yeah, we're only getting waivers on the 52 affordable units, and they are, those waivers are different in that the ones that were earlier discussed, in that they require 60 years of affordability at 60% or below. So we're paying the SDCs on the 10 market rate units. And yes, this loan will be repaid if we sell it or change its use.
Yeah, all of our loans are due on sale.
And the developer fee, we're deferring $1 million of it.
Lightning, did I misunderstand your question? Or please, go ahead. Yeah.
You've responded to my questions in a reasonable manner. If I might add, and this is just my last concern on this, is that you have a set a 260,000 unit price. Correct me if I'm wrong, that equates up to around maybe $16 million overall value on this project. Now, correct me if I'm not wrong on this, but you're saying there's going to be the term used, a stabilization value of $10 million. Are you saying that after you build this building, it's only going to be worth at stabilization point of $10 million, or am I reading the information incorrect?
Good question. Yeah.
I think you're probably reading it correctly, and that gives my board of directors heartburn quite regularly that we spend more money than the property is valued at. But they have valuation methodologies, and the valuation is based on the income for the building. And because the income is restricted because the rents are restricted, the property valuation is skewed. So if this were to be on, on the market in unrestricted rents, the appraised value may come in quite differently.
Now, he raised the prospect of due on sale. What's the scenario by which this building would be sold and taken out of this agreement? It's long-term affordability under the terms of the loan, right?
Right. So our loans require 60 years of affordability or the time of the public subsidy ceasing. That restrictive covenant that Sarah was referencing, the thing that keeps the rents low, stays on during that entire time period. Extremely rarely we've had a case where somebody has not continued to provide the affordability, in which case the public gets repaid.
We've never sold a property.
Okay, just my final response. I have a little bit of difficulty on this, on developing a building at $16 million. It's only going to be worth $10 million, and you're getting almost a $2 million developer fee. So that's just a concern I have, and I will live with that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, we appreciate you raising good questions. So thanks very much, both of you. Okay, then this is
an additional question for
Okay,
staff.
sorry, go ahead.
And it's about the Americans with Disability accessibility. I appreciate the upgrade to the elevator, but in looking at the exhibit, there's some mention of it under the resident services, but I'm not clear on how many of the units will have particular accessibility upgrades.
So the 4 of the units will be fully accessible, actually 5 of the units, 2 in the Fritz and 3 in the Erickson at the beginning of the project. All of the units are adaptable, and all of the units are accessible by the elevator. So any of the units could be adapted in the future for accessibility.
What's the minimum federal requirements for what the percentage has to be fully accessible in the construction?
This project, it's 4 units that we would need to meet, and so we're doing one more, and they all could be adapted.
Yeah. A lot of our developers are going to adaptable because, of course, what happens is if you don't have 5 people that need fully accessible the day you lease it up, then those units are gone, and then the next person doesn't have. So we pay to put extra blocking behind the walls and that sort of thing. So just because those 5 units are full doesn't mean someone couldn't move in and we could meet their needs.
Terrific. And in future projects, if you could pull that particular piece out, I always appreciate knowing
Yes,
what we're
absolutely.
doing above and beyond, and I appreciate that we are doing more than is minimal.
Yeah, no, we
required.
should. Thank you.
And Tracy, I appreciate what you said earlier in a very diplomatic way, that very rarely do people breach the regulatory agreement on the 60-year covenant. But I am also pleased that in those rare instances where that comes up, the Bureau takes a very hard line about getting the public subsidy back. And that's, I can imagine situations where that causes heartburns on the other side, particularly with nonprofits. But a deal's a deal, and we have to get that money back and reinvest it if we don't get the long-term benefit. So I appreciate your, I know you've taken some heat on that, so thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. Any other questions? Then I believe we're ready to move to a roll call. Thank you.
Salzman.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Fritz.
Well, this is a great project. In addition to the elevator, I'm happy to see the seismic upgrades and the mix of incomes in the project. I imagine that the 10 units at market rate are going to get snapped up like hotcakes. And so this is an example of using the traditional financing with the traditional SDC waivers for the lower income apartments that is moving forward even before the Old Town Chinatown plan is adopted. So thank you for your work. Aye.
Fish.
I just want to say, in my many years working on housing issues, I've been at ribbon cuttings where we've honored Bud Clark, Gretchen Kafori, John Gray, and others. Now, finally, Commissioner Fritz. Soon there'll be a Novick, a Saltzman, and I'm not lobbying, but I just want to say that it
Just
is
saying.
it is a wonderful recognition. We at this city. The reason we have strong foundations to these buildings is they reflect our shared values. And I just, forgive me for being a broken record on this, but the values that underlie this project that this council has historically supported are, 1, 30% of urban renewal funds to affordable housing, and that has not always been popular. 2, 60-year affordability, which presents challenges to some of even our best nonprofit partners. 3, public-private partnerships. The city doesn't build housing. We work with high-capacity, mission-driven nonprofits primarily who deliver a great product. 4, we believe that housing, affordable, people priced out of the market should be in desirable parts of our city, not just places that are on the margins, and it costs more to do so. And we get criticized for doing that, but that's what opportunity really means, is putting housing where we would like to live, those of us who can afford housing, and not just marginalizing housing. And then thinking about services, housing, and building a community around people in transition. This goes back to a 2012 NOFA, a competitive process, which means this is selected based on competition with other providers measured against rigorous standards, and this project coming to the top. Congratulations. I'm pleased to support it. Aye.
Hales.
This is a great project. It's not an inexpensive project, but it's a great project. And I appreciate the team working effectively together and putting it before us. Everything about this is good. It is more affordable housing. It is some market rate housing. It is a seismic improvement to one more of our dangerous buildings that needs to be improved. So 1 down, thousands to go, but 2 down in your case, right? Thank you. So we appreciate innovative housing on all those levels, and I'm really looking forward to this next chapter for a great old building and bringing a little bit more life back to that part of our city. Thank you very much. Aye. Okay, we have a couple items left to do on second reading, and then we're done for this morning.
784, amend disaster policy council membership and leadership strategy.
Roll call.
Salzman. Novick.
Aye.
Fritz?
Well, I very much appreciate the work, particularly of Commissioner Fish and Saltzman last week to amend this ordinance to something that I can enthusiastically support. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hales?
Aye. 785.
Declare one city-owned property at Southeast Foster Road and Southeast 91st Avenue as surplus and authorize the Director of Bureau of Transportation to transfer the property to the Portland Development Commission.
Second reading, roll call.
Salzman? Novick?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
I'm voting aye, and Mayor, on August 6th, I think, or possibly August 13th, BES will be coming forward with a surplus property ordinance, and the difference here is that prior to it going out to a competitive process, someone at the city put a marker down. What we'll be coming to is some surplus property where no interest has been expressed to the city, and we're getting authorization to go out and seek a competitive process externally. Aye.
Hales?
Aye. 786.
Authorize the Bureau of Environmental Services to convey certain permanent easements at Union Pacific Railroad in exchange for a permanent easement license and agreement to install improvements on city-owned and controlled property at Northeast 2nd and Flanders Street.
Great. Roll call, please.
Salzman? Novick?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Steve, thanks to your team at PBOT. This was really hard. The PBOT team figured out a lot of the most complicated pieces, and I heard nothing but great feedback from the BES team, and we appreciate the partnership.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Hales?
Complicated deal, good result. Aye.
Mayor, one more matter for good
Please.
order, if I could. I will be gone next week. When I get back, we'll be in the heart of Major League Soccer All-Star Week. And I hope to see my colleagues.
We still have to show up for work, you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
I hope to
This
see you.
work for those of us who are the Parks Commissioner.
Well, Mayor, we are going to be checking on permits at a number of these events. But I did attend a remarkable meeting recently with all the partners that have been working for a year to make this happen. And at that meeting, we went over the accomplishment list and the agenda for this event and other things. And what I want to share with my colleagues is that Mike Golub, Merritt Paulson, and the development team at this meeting expressed tremendous praise for the collaboration with the Parks Bureau, which went out of their way to accommodate a number of events downtown. PBOT, which worked with them to create a dedicated walkway from some events to the stadium, and that's not uncomplicated to close the street. All the other bureaus that had skin in the game, and then just generally, there was some kvetching about how some of their partners were hard to work with than others. I was swollen with pride to be in a meeting where the city of Portland was singled out as being a great partner on something that of this magnitude. So I want to share that good news and thank all my colleagues for their participation in making this a hugely successful All-Star event.
It's great to hear. It's nice to hear that we're able to pull that off and make this a success. So one good of the order announcement for me, I will be participating in tomorrow afternoon's hearing by telephone, but because of the awkwardness of that, I'm going to ask Commissioner Saltzman as the council president to preside, and I will participate, but I don't think I can run the meeting by telephone. So, I will be here in voice only.
Me too.
You also?
I will be participating by voice. And Commissioner Fritz, how long do you think the hearing will last?
I'm not sure. It seems like there's a lot of people who want to come and participate, but we'll try to do some group voicing of support rather than having everybody say how much they're looking forward to referring this to the voters.
And I neglected to mention the Bureau of Development Services. A lot of the complex stuff around banners, signs, soccer balls on top of buildings got resolved because BDS gave concierge service. So thank you to that as well.
And Commissioner Fritz, I should say that we've been looking for a variety of theme songs for the concept of maintenance in PBOT for the past few months. We'd be happy to share any of those suggestions with you.
Oh, we have one already. Thank you.
Oh, the battle begins. We are recessed till tomorrow at 2 p.m.